The unexpectedly rapid and peaceful reconciliation of the conflict between the Russian Ministry of Defense and the private military company, the Wagner Group, especially as there is no confirmation that Prigozhin's demands were met, left many people very suspicious. Some analysts started building theories as to how such a large-scale act could be used to achieve strategic objectives and concluded that this would be a great opportunity to redeploy forces to the Kharkiv region and take the city into a pocket, as the returning from Moscow Wagner forces were very close to the Belgorod region. It is reasonable to some extent to consider such a possibility because both sides are monitoring each other's movement of troops very tightly, and the only way to show up somewhere unexpectedly is by tricking the other party into thinking that they don't need to care about it. However, firstly, it's not like all of the Wagners were heading north, most troops were occupying Rostov and military objects nearby. So, the Wagner forces got dispersed. Secondly, there is not much of Wagner's left anyways. According to Prigozhin, he had 85,000 troops to take Bakhmut, and it took him more than 8 months and mind-boggling losses to take it. The Kharkiv front is 10 times bigger, Kharkiv itself is 10 times bigger, and Ukrainians have tens of thousands of soldiers in the region. So, even if all Wagner units suddenly redeployed here, the prospect of a quick victory would be virtually non-existent. Besides, Russian forces had already tried to take Kharkiv with more troops and under much better conditions, and it ended up in a disaster. Lastly, Wagner forces were initially in Luhansk, so making a several-day detour towards Moscow is less productive. And this is where other analysts concluded that, in reality, Wagner forces are redeploying to Belarus to attack Kiev or Lviv. On the surface, this also ties in nicely with the fact that the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, got involved and eventually offered shelter to Prigozhin. However, all previous points remain relevant counterarguments here as well. Dispersing troops by occupying Rostov would be counterproductive. The front line is 30 times bigger, Ukrainians have tens of thousands of soldiers on guard, Russians already tried anyways, and here there are also dense forests, which proved to be an extremely hard barrier. On top of that, during the mutiny, Russian forces lost 7 aircraft and 15 pilots. Half of them are extraordinarily valuable. And this is not taking into account the blown-up Wagner convoys and violent engagements with the regular Russian forces that were caught on camera and shown in my previous video. Nonetheless, one thing the Wagner mutiny actually achieved was completely cutting off supplies of the Eastern Russian group of forces for at least 2 days and confusing the soldiers on the ground, of which Ukrainians successfully took advantage. Ukrainian fighters from the Bakhmut region reported that when Prigozhin posted a video and said that the regular Russian forces bombed Wagner camps and the Wagner forces were marching on Moscow, the Russian radio exchanges became completely wild, and eventually, it caused a series of violent confrontations between the regular Russian formations and a few Wagner units that were still in Bakhmut to help. First of all, Ukrainian fighters from the 24th Assault Brigade reported that Ukrainians finally breached the Russian defense in the tree line along the road and started storming the last remaining fortification on their way to Klishchivka, namely, the infamous trench network on the hill. Secondly, after clearing the tree line, Ukrainians could attack Russian positions in the forest from 2 sides, and by the end of the second day, the Ukrainian 5th Assault Brigade reportedly cleared up to 40% of the forest. However, the biggest news, by far, is that Ukrainians crossed the Dnipro River and established a bridgehead on the eastern bank near the Antonivsky Bridge. Geolocated footage confirms that Ukrainian boats have deployed Ukrainian forces to this region. Russian forces tried to chase Ukrainians away with direct assault, however, they faced tough resistance. Ukrainians posted footage of Ukrainian helicopters targeting Russian assault units. Eventually, Russian sources reported that the units on the ground got almost encircled, which is why they decided to retreat.